Welcome to the Young Hearts Run Free podcast. I'm Jasmin Paris.
And welcome along to the episode, Jasmin. Thank you very much for joining us. We are super thrilled that we have caught up with you, and we can't wait to have a natter with you about, well, all sorts of things. Because as you've got, as our listeners well know, your CV is quite extensive, and your adventures are well, they've gone global recently, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that. What we do like to do on the podcast, just so that we, as a way of introducing you and or giving you a chance to introduce yourself, is to find out a little bit about how you got into running, what's your backstory as such. So over to you, just for a wee intro.
Yeah, so I mean, I came into running really from hill walking. So I did. My parents are quite outdoorsy people, and we hiked in the mountains and hills from an early age. I think. I mean, they carried me on their backs across the Andes when I was sort of a year old. I was brought up in the Peak District, so Bleaklow was sort of on my front doorstep. That was my backyard, and so I did lots of hiking during my sort of formative years, and then once we were old enough with my brother, we did lots of hiking in mountains around Europe, really. And the wilder the better. We'd take all the stuff we needed for 7 to 10 days, and we just pretty much aimed to see nobody and just explore wild places. And we wild camped and had like fantastic adventures. So that's kind of my background. And it wasn't till I left university and I was working in my first job as a new graduate in Glossop, which is very close to where I was brought up. And a colleague suggested I go along to a local fell race, which I did. I ran it in road trainers and spent a lot of the time on the descent falling over. But I remember getting to the end and I was completely oxygen deprived. You know, you can taste kind of blood in your mouth, and that sort of. But I thought it was amazing. I was like completely taken by it immediately. I thought this is a fantastic group of people, and I can't believe people are running around on the hills for fun like this. Is exactly what I want to do. So I joined a local club, which is Glossopdale Harriers, and started going out with them. And I think at the start I was quite nervous. I always wanted to go with a group that was going on to the proper hills, the group that was doing the big runs. But at the start I was definitely bringing up the rear. But yeah, I quickly got faster and then stopped worrying so much about being left behind. And yeah, it went from there really. Then I started sort of that year I did started doing some longer stuff. Then I actually spent a year in the States when I unfortunately was pretty limited in how much I could run because I was working pretty hard and I was living in a big city. But when I came back, part of the reason I sort of came back and got a job in Edinburgh, my next training post, was that I was near the hills and obviously not far from big mountains. And that's when I guess the fell running really took off. And and that's kind of where it all started. And it's really just developed from that point onwards.
Yep. Okay. You obviously like a hard challenge, and we'll get onto that. But it's interesting that even in the early days of your running, you sought out the sort of harder stuff. Has it always been something that has been an appeal for you, the more challenging stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the early days, even that first kind of year that I did fell running, I realized I liked doing longer things, partly because there was less sort of rush and more chance to look around and enjoy the surroundings. I like the sort of journey. I like the chance to sort of chat to people along the way, to eat nice food. That was always a kind of a part of the bonus for me in doing long events, was that you could eat all the way and just enjoy it. So all those factors, and just generally, I think the longer races take you to wilder places because you can go further away from civilization. So for all those reasons, it sort of ticked the boxes for me. It was more like, and more of kind of an adventure and a journey. And not as bothered about kind of going all out and not really being able to look around and that kind of sprint. I mean, it's exciting, exhilarating for a moment, but I kind of like the journey style races. So I guess I sought those out from the start, and then I realized I was fairly good at that sort of thing. And also, I think those sorts of races more often take you to sort of really wild, rough places. And that was definitely something that I realized that naturally just seemed to be better at than other people relatively was crossing difficult terrain. So once it hit kind of technical stuff, then generally I was moving faster than other people, and that's where I think I started to find it easier to keep level with the men, for example, was on really challenging terrain, because then it becomes less important how physically fast you can go, but because it's more about technique and things as well.
Oh, can I ask a quick question? You said that that sort of hill walking evolved into fell running, and that first fell race that you did, where you kind of realised that you enjoyed it. Had you done much other running other than that? Do you know, like road
Yeah,
running,
I hadn't really.
stuff
So
like
like
that?
I'd done like, like at uni, I'd go for a run in the park, but it'd be
Uh-huh.
like 20 minutes around Sefton Park in Liverpool type sort of run. So I
Uh-huh.
think I definitely wouldn't have called myself a runner at that point. I did go for some runs, but it was more part of generally being fit. I mean, I climbed, I
Yep.
hiked, I did swimming, I did a bit of running, but I definitely didn't think of myself as a runner at that point. So I would be surprised if I ever had done a run much more than an hour. More likely, more sort of like half an hour if I went for a run, and it wasn't a regular thing. It was occasional.
And a dead other follow-up question: have you ever done like a road marathon?
I
Official?
haven't, and I think I probably will at some point just to see what I could do,
Yeah,
just out of interest. But I find it harder to motivate myself to train on the roads, so that's the kind of challenge of that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
There is a good half marathon in Auchterarder later on this year. If you fancy a wee sort of step up, we can do that. We can
Thanks,
send you.
John.
We can send you the details to that.
Nice plug for the Auchterarder half marathon there.
When you're saying that you never consider yourself as a runner, what is there a time that you did then? When did the switch to think, well, I am a runner? When did that happen for you? Sorry, we're way
I
off the
think
question set we set you, but
I
I
think I
told you
think
that with that.
I think I think there was just I think it was more that I I think that anybody can really be a go running, and so I guess I'm more of sort of my sort of realized there became a point when I realized this was something that I really loved, and this was part of my identity. So I guess if that's what you mean by thinking of yourself as a runner, then
Mm-hmm.
that was probably sometime during that first year when I was living in Glossop and discovered this kind of fell running thing. Because it was interesting because I just felt immediately so at home and so comfortable with that group of people and in that environment. And really don't think that would have been the case if I'd been road running. You know, a large part of it was the fact that it was on the hills and with this kind of group of people having adventures on the hills. It was just felt so right. It was like coming home to this situation. You know, it was just felt right from the word go. So I think it was quite quickly, within a few months, probably, that I really sort of realised that this was something I wanted to do long term.
And you spoke there about, was it Glossop Dale Harriers? Did I
Yeah,
pick that up
yeah.
right? Yeah. And is that a club that you're still active part of, or have you?
Yeah, I mean, I still have friends there. I still sort of feel like I am. If I had to say a second claim club, it would definitely be Glossopdale Harriers. It's just that I lived there for a year, and then I went to the States and lived in Minnesota, and then lived in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and then when I moved back, I moved to Edinburgh. So when it didn't make sense to carry on running for Glossopdale, so then I moved to Carnethy, and I've run for Carnethy ever since. So Carnethy Hill Running Club is my running club, but I definitely have a fond spot for Glossopdale. And when we're down there, we we see friends and we do things with Glossopdale Harriers. So I think I'm sort of an honorary member down there, really, in some ways.
And so Carnethy is your active member of Carnethy at the moment, and so yeah, you'll know the Pentlands like the back of your hand. I can imagine, having spent hours up there. I'm supposing, from the ski centre and all the tough little climbs that I've
Yeah.
had. Well, I say the pleasure. Yeah, it's for a hill range so close to the city of Edinburgh. It's got a nice little range of terrain, hasn't it?
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. So we're really lucky to have as a kind of training ground. I live a little bit outside Edinburgh, so I live on right beside the Moorfoot Hills. So
Right.
my training is sort of divided between the Pentlands and the Moorfoots. My work is right beside the Pentland Hills. So
Right.
if I'm ever running from you know, before work or after work, or then it's always in the Pentlands. And it's easier to get lots of ascent in the Pentlands. So if you're training for kind of pretty hilly races, then you're better off in the Pentlands than the Moorfoots. But the Moorfoots have this kind of rougher terrain, there's fewer paths, there's more sort of heather and bog, so it's better for like training, for example. So it's a bit of both, and obviously I can run the Moorfoots from my front door. So yeah, I do a bit of both. But yeah, the Pentlands certainly feature quite highly on my training. I mean, I think before one Barkley, I ran up 22 times up Castle Law, which is a hill in the Pentlands, on one occasion, you know, one morning. So yeah, I've certainly visited the summits of those hills quite a lot.
But like you say, it's that little gym right on your doorstep as such, and it's the best of gyms, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
well, the terrain's reasonable. You don't have to travel, you know, for hours to get there. Yeah, we sometimes forget how. Well, I do anyway. Forget how lucky we are. I'm based in Perthshire, and we've got stuff on our doorstep that other people would kill for, especially if you're living in the city. And you've got a bit of that by the sounds of it when you were over in the
Yeah.
States and
Yeah.
in Minneapolis, I think you said, where
Mm.
you're like, 2.5 hour drive to get to the stuff I love.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
And it's free. The Pentlands gym is free as well.
Yeah,
As
membership free.
Yeah, and you mentioned Carnethy. We're not going to get hung up on running clubs because there's a big furore goes on about running clubs when you start speaking about them. But we know that Carnethy is that bright red and yellow vest, isn't it? So
Yep.
very, very recognisable. Right, we've already got so much to speak about that people might be tuning in to think, let's speak about the Ramsey round, let's speak about all that sort of stuff. We're not going to touch that today. We've got a quite specific set of things we want to speak to you. That's also me opening the door to a part 2 that we hope you'll come back, Jasmin, and speak to us about the rounds and the Munros and these other adventures. But there's a few things that we really, really want to dive into. The first one, it's not your most recent adventure, but it's the 2019 Spine Race. So we've spoken to a few people that's taken part in the Spine. We're very honoured to have the course record holder with us today. My first question is, what drove you to enter the Spine Race?
Yeah, I mean, it took a while for me to want to do it. I think originally I followed it for quite a few years, and originally I thought, why would you want to do that to yourself? It just looks unpleasant and cold and dark and yeah, not much fun. I guess and it's interesting because the race always starts pretty much every year starts the same day as the Marsden to Edale race, or the Trigger Fell race as it's now called. And I ran that many years, so we would always cross over with the Spine runners coming the other way, and they'd be wearing their big rucksacks and they'd be going into the wind and rain and looking miserable already after 5 miles. And so as I say, so for quite a few years, I thought, why, you'd be crazy. I guess it's one of those things that just kind of grew on me. The idea, some little voice in my head was asking whether I could do it. And obviously, when you're dot watching, there's always a part of you that's thinking, could you do that, and could you go faster than that? And I guess it's just that challenge. It was like a new challenge, doing a non-stop race in winter, navigating yourself all the way across, you know, up the kind of backbone of the northern England, and I just was excited to know whether I could do it. So that's really why I signed up. So it was partly just wanting the excitement of the intrigue of knowing whether of approaching a challenge where you didn't know whether you could finish it, and also at the time my daughter was, I think when I signed up, my daughter was like 10 or 11 months, and she, you know, I was back at work working full time, and she wasn't sleeping that well, and I was struggling to get up in the morning and train, and I needed something like a challenge, something to really sort of focus and get me out of bed in the morning. And I signed up for the Spine, and it did exactly that. You know, I was suddenly excited about training, and it sort of really gave me a focus, a reason to try and fit everything, make myself super efficient to be able to get out and train each day. And that was really good for me as well, like in terms of mental health and everything else. So yeah, so it kind of fulfilled those two those two kind of things. But as I say, the main one was probably just the challenge or the intrigue of can you do it or not.
I think there's a wee sign of the woman there, because there are other challenges you might have taken on. But to take on the spine, and I hope you don't mind me saying that it's also been well reported that you were actually expressing milk while you were doing the spine challenge as well. So, and that, I think you were already a well-known name in the running circuit, if we're going to call it a circuit. But you went out and you absolutely shattered the course record. Was it one of these experiences, and you can speak about this as much as you like, I'm not wanting to cut any discussion short, but was it one of these experiences where everything just worked for you? Because to set a course record like that, it's quite phenomenal.
Yeah, to some extent. I mean, that's why I sometimes get asked whether I'd go back to the spine, and I've not said never, but a lot, everything did come together, and it's not, it'd be difficult to have a race that went as well as that one did. But certainly, I think, it was just exciting as well because the I just approached it as a kind of blank slate, see what you can do type thing, and that's the way it ended up going. I think if I went back, it would always be, then you'd be kind of cutting off small margins, even if you did improve the record. So it was just nice to kind of go out there and just give it your absolute best shot and do what you could. So yeah.
When did you? Sorry.
No, you go for it, John.
I'm on a roll here. Was it? Was it always your aim to set a new course record, or was that something that materialised as you went through the first few days? How did that work?
I think to be honest, when I started, I had no idea really. I thought I guess beforehand I'd looked at times, how fast you'd have to run to finish on the Wednesday evening. That was one of my main things, honestly, was not being away from my daughter for that long. So I'd already said, like, I would ideally not be away for more than 3 nights. That's what I'd said, which it meant that if you finished on, so with my husband, we looked at like if you ran at 4 miles an hour and you had these sleeps, and we worked out that you could have like a reasonable sleeps if you ran at 4 miles an hour and still finish on Wednesday evening. So I guess that was like a rough schedule. In reality, I was thinking it's probably not going to be possible because, people had done it before that I have great respect for, and not managed to achieve that sort of pace in the later half of the race. So I was prepared that might not work, but it was there at the back of my mind. But when I started the race, I had no idea really. I just thought I'll give it my best shot. I want to finish this thing, and then I just kind of went with the race as it developed. And really what happened was during the first night I ran with Ian, Keith and Eugenie, and we sort of I guess worked together for that first night, and it was really nice to have company. I found that night in some ways the hardest because I was away from my daughter for the first time like that, and yeah, I found that quite difficult. And in some ways, once we got into the second night, I was more engrossed in the race. At that point, I was running with Eugenie, and we did get a bit of sleep that second night. And then going into the kind of the third day, that was the point when really I broke away from Eugenie, partly because I was getting a little bit frustrated. I felt like a little bit like he was sort of hanging on to me, and that was really good because it provided me with that like kick up the bum to kind of just give it a go and try and break away. And it was kind of it was really exciting. It was really exciting because usually in a race, I guess, as long as that, and you've been racing for for so many hours, it maybe stops feeling quite as much like a race, but that certainly did feel like a race on that third night with Eugenie chasing me down, and we were getting these updates from people along the course telling me what the gap was between us. And so it was super exciting. So and then I just knew I wanted to try and stay away from him. So I think that's really what turned it into a course record of that magnitude, was just this desire to get away from Eugenie. And I've got a lot to thank him for in that way, because he was pretty important, I think, in what in the final result was the fact that he was chasing me down through that last night and day.
Right. Too many questions. Think of one. You mentioned sleep on that first night, Jasmin. It's a question we've been asking quite a lot recently. How much sleep did you have? But before you go to that, how much sleep do you normally have on a day-to-day basis? Are you a 6, 7, 8 hours? What's your normal thing?
I mean, I've never needed that much sleep. So like 6 hours will be fine. When I was at that point, when I was breastfeeding my daughter and I was working, and like I'm pretty sure I wasn't getting more than 6 hours of sleep a night, because she was still waking up in the middle of the night to feed. So yeah. Interestingly, right now, currently, I'm sleeping more than that, and that is just some sort of fatigue thing I had through the autumn, and I just needing to sleep a bit more. So I guess you just have to sort of listen to what your body tells you. But generally, in my life, 6 hours has been enough, roughly.
Okay, and then that during the night on the spine, was it 30 minutes? Was it an hour? Couple of hours? What were you getting?
And the first night we didn't sleep at all. The second night, I think it was like 2.5 hours ish that I slept. And then the third night I lay down for about half an hour, and I didn't really sleep, but theoretically that was my sleep. I think I was just too wired to fall asleep. It's almost like I'd gone past the point. And also I knew that I'd only allowed myself half an hour, and I just it's difficult. I was pretty cold as well. I guess my body was a bit tired, and I struggled to fall asleep, so I didn't actually sleep for that last half hour. But yeah. I should add, going back to the sleep thing, I guess at weekends I probably have slept more. So I'd say on average somewhere between 6 and 8. But yeah, probably 6 to 7 would be an average night.
Cool. Good. And then, sorry, Steve, I was going to ask, it's in my head, Alston lasagna. Did you partake?
Yeah, it was amazing. Really good. Really good.
Sorry, Stephen.
It's the only thing drawing John to the spine. They've got their own Instagram page. Did you know? The Alston lasagna. Have I said that right? Alston.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Brilliant. That's a bonus.
That's how I say it anyway. So
I mean,
Yeah.
And well, that neatly moves us on to fueling. What's your preferred, like for a race of that magnitude? What's your fueling strategy? Are you taking a variety? You spoke earlier on about real food, and that's one of your draws to doing the long stuff. If there's ever a chance to eat real food during a race, I take it the spine is that one.
Definitely. I think when you start like races like the spine, when it's that sort of distance, then like real food is definitely the way to go. I generally only use gels if I'm kind of in in a real sort of energy slump, and I just need something to give me a sudden boost to get me eating other stuff again. So generally I would try to eat proper food. Is often, it's almost it's easier to eat real food if you're not moving that fast. So I think the pace on the spine was actually pretty good for that, because you're just going kind of a steady effort, not going all out. Barkley I found a little bit harder, and maybe it's because there's quite, it's quite intense, the climbing on Barkley up and down. But again, I tried to eat normal food. So things like, I had things like flapjack and kind of fruit and nut type stuff. And I had sandwiches, I had cold pizza, I had some small roast potatoes with salt, which were really good. And those are the sorts of things, chocolate bars, sweets, that when I was actually racing round. And then when I came into camp, I had pasta, I had chocolate oat milk, I had porridge. So porridge is fantastic. And bananas. I've come back to time and time again that I actually really can eat bananas. Even when I'm feeling pretty rubbish. And baked beans. I had baked beans in the kind of interlupal periods on Barkley as well. And I've generally found on long races that baked beans and rice pudding are also things that I can eat even when it gets pretty rough, if somebody else can carry them for me.
Well, you've just pretty much regaled John's weekly shopping list.
It's a buffet.
I've seen him sort of, oh yeah, he's nodding along there, Jasmin, as you were sort of rattling through it, and he says, yep, I've tried that, done that, yep, roast tatties, yep.
It's funny though. We previously, just recently, Jasmin, sorry, we spoke with Marco Consani, who did the spine just in January there, and we were talking about food, and his big thing, he had this big bar of dairy milk, was it dairy milk or some kind of chocolate he had, wasn't it?
Big bar of Christmas dairy milk, I think.
Yeah, and then, but we're also speaking about, Marco's spoke about a number of things that he's tried over the years, like potatoes, and some things have worked, some things haven't worked, you know. So, but were you speaking there about the spine or Barkley or both with your food?
A bit of both. So if you want to know specifically spine, I think it was I ate a lot of chocolate bars on the spine. I'm pretty sure I had flapjack, 'cause that's just been like a thing that we've made homemade flapjack ever since we kind of started doing long running stuff, me and my husband, and yeah, we've got like a family recipe, so it's like a tradition. I had definitely had pizza on the spine. Yeah, so those are kind of things that I remember having on the spine race.
Is that flapjack recipe available, or is it a closely guarded secret?
It's not a closely guarded secret, and it has nuts in it as well, and some white chocolate as well.
All the good stuff.
Yeah.
All the good stuff. And I've got to mention this as well, because it's becoming more and more into my mind. Stephen has mentioned a number of times about a laser beam pulling you to the finish.
Tractor beam, John.
Tractor beam. I keep saying laser beam, tractor beam. But from what you've said already, was that your daughter pulling you to the finish?
Yeah, no, I was really, really motivated to get back to the end of the spine to be back with my daughter. Yeah. That was a huge motivation. Yeah. And I just actually used that as something to motivate myself when I was really rough, was thinking about home, and thinking about being back with her and my husband, and especially the sorts of things that we'd do together the day when I got back. I thought about how we'd go for a little walk, and the sorts of things, just the day-to-day stuff, because that's really what you want. You want that comfort and day-to-day kind of touch, and in time with loved ones. So that's what I tried to focus on when it was like really dark moments, was just to imagine her, and imagine her her little mannerisms, and kind of immerse myself in those sorts of positive thoughts, rather than thinking negative things.
Much more powerful than that.
Definitely.
Okay. The spine, I know it's almost like let's gloss over the spine, that amazing, fantastic achievement in 2019. But if it's okay, I wouldn't mind hopping on an aeroplane and going over to Tennessee now, for something that a lot of our listeners, and certainly John and myself, were doing our best to follow on social media as much as you can do with Barkley, and its little intriguing approaches to things that are a little bit different to the norm. That Laz has certainly a different way of doing things than many race organisers. But what was the hook for you initially to consider Barkley? What attracted you to it?
I think after the spine, I got interviewed quite a lot, and something that kept coming back at me was, "Are you going to do Barkley?" And I'd sort of known peripherally about it for a while, but I think, again, just like the spine, it was something that kind of needed time. And I probably knew already back then, the minute people started asking me about it, that I would at some point. But I just needed to wait till I really wanted to do it. And I actually remember the day when it happened, and I was suddenly like, I want to do Barkley. Because I think for that race, more than any other, it needs to come from inside. You need to really want to do it. You need to be fully committed to doing it, because so much of that race is about putting yourself beyond the point where it really hurts. So and like, you need to be fully committed, I think, for that. So yeah, there was a point, I think, I'd had my son, so I'd had my second child, and it was a bit like with the first time round. I needed something to kind of really, a challenge to take on, to really sort of kickstart me back into the into the fully being back as a kind of a competitive runner. And Barkley was the thing that really inspired me and made me want to be back there and be at my kind of peak of my capabilities. So yeah, it was again that kind of challenge of can you do it? Can you put yourself, because with Barkley that you're going to be putting yourself at the edge of, you know, of what you're absolutely capable of. So I think it was that.
And tell us if, like John and I and a lot of our listeners as well, we get right immersed into the Barkley universe, let's call it, and we suck up every bit of knowledge that's on YouTube, on blogs, on the internet, and things like that. Are you somebody who gets, you know, who gets into the whole sort of researching a race like that, or is that just the likes of us who actually have never got a chance at ever doing it?
No, I think when you first go there, like that's your only way of getting information to give you an idea of what it's like. So yeah, I read the books, and read the blogs and tried to gather as much of information as I could. This time it wasn't quite that much like that because I knew already what to expect, and so I could work more on like mentally, personally, how I needed to prepare and physically, and that sort of thing, and spent less time worrying about what the details of it were because you know, it's so vague and kind of mysterious when you approach it as an outsider. But that's one of the big things that changes when you go from being a virgin to a veteran at that race and have done it before, is that you have less uncertainty in those respects and you can focus on the things that you know are going to make a biggest difference when you're out there.
Can I? Sorry.
Sorry.
This
I
is
was
you.
just going to say, just something that sparked into my head there. That picture that you have in your head of the terrain, the steepness of the climbs, the briar, all this stuff that we hear about. How did that compare with reality? Had you prepared for it quite as bad as it was, or was it around about the same as you expected?
Yeah, I guess maybe one of the things is that there are certainly briars there. This year, I actually felt they were better than last year,
Okay.
and it's not like you have to push your way through to make progress. It's not like you're like pushing back branches to kind of get through. At least
Yep.
not in most places. In most places, the forest is fairly like you can move through it like fairly quickly. It's not like it's a dense kind of a knot of undergrowth if you're on the right path. If you're not in the right place, then that's a totally different matter. I discovered
Okay.
this year. Yeah, so I I think there's that. Like I think it is a lot of up and down. You know, it's pretty steep. So think about the steepest kind of fell races that you do, and then just think about doing that non-stop for 60 hours. It's a bit like that. So you're prepared for what you're used to running steep things, but
Yeah.
it's not like any other ultra race that's that sort of distance would not have that much climb in it. So it's a lot of climb. So that is, I think, that's something that I was prepared for it to have climb, but maybe not prepared for it to have quite as much as it did. And maybe the terrain was a little bit more open, although it's, as I say, it's not easy if you go out there for that long.
I don't know if I've even got a picture in my mind about what it's like. You know, I think it's still very. It's got a mystique about it, Barkley. You know, it still has that. And I said to Stephen earlier in the month that I think there was a wee bit more social media coverage this year and actually seeing things in the park, but not too much. However, sorry, digress. My question is, if you're willing to share this, what were your lessons learned from 2022 going into this year?
I mean, I guess it's not really giving away any secrets because I'm not going to tell you about the course itself. And it wouldn't mean anything to you anyway. I think it's just the main thing was that in 2022, I navigated at least probably a loop and a half or a bit more of it completely on my own. So, and was really helpful to do from the point of view of I definitely felt more confident going into it this year because last year I was really nervous about that side of it. You know, like how would you get around if you had no idea where you were going and you're just stuck in the forest, in the middle of the forest. And this year I very much came into it thinking I can do this. I've done it before, and I think it was more that I was just improving on what I'd done previously because I did get lost a lot last year and made a lot of mistakes, which cost time. And realistically, if you want to get around the whole thing, you need to be, you just need to be hitting everything spot on and not making mistakes. So I got better this year. Still improvement needed, but I got a lot better. There's things that you can look for example, a lot of it's based around, it's not necessarily all on a compass bearing. It's like, look out for this feature here, or look out for that feature there. It's not something that will be on a map. The map's not got that sort of level of detail at all. It's just, you have to be on the ground. You have to have run the course before to know what to look for. And so that's the sort of thing, hopefully, that will never appear on the web or anything. And that's, you just have to go there to experience it, to know it. So yeah, those sorts of features and a memory of those sorts of features help for the next year as well.
And on that, Jasmin, when you're watching it transpire on social media, which is the only way really that you can keep up with it, and on your various mates' WhatsApp groups as they give up their updates that they're gleaning from different places, there's quite a buzz about it. The equivalent of dot watching, let's call it. What you notice happening is that there's quite a lot of alliances struck up between runners, and I know it's like Demo, for instance, this year was running, as a bit of a group, and I'm assuming that was a bit of a tactic to help with, like, no being as confident with the navigation, but with him being a first timer this year, and your point around about navigating a loop wholly on your own, and how that almost recce, it's almost doing it a disservice to call it a recce, helped you almost this year by having that in your locker. Do you notice that these little alliances, is that something that you got involved in to help you?
Yeah, so absolutely. Like on the first loop, there's quite a lot of people around still. So I think I kind of moved between groups a little bit, because the thing is, you need to be with people that are moving either the same speed as you or just very marginally faster. So it's obviously dependent on that. So the first loop I was definitely running with people for a reasonable part of it. The second loop I did run for most of it with Jared and Carl and Joe. And so it was just, I think, 2 books before the end that I had a bit of a kind of sugar slump, and they just dropped me on the climb. So, which was a bit unfortunate. And then I didn't find the next book very quickly. So a gap opened up a bit there. And I had told them, like, don't wait for me, because I didn't want to hold them back. And I felt like I'd been lucky to run with them through the night, most of the night. But that was, yeah. So I think in an ideal world, you definitely would run more time with a small group, because that's probably the way to finish it, with 1 or 2 other people, to work as a group. I think that would be the ideal situation, yeah. But I mean, the fact that I ran loops 3 and 4 completely on my own this time, again, was good experience, and hopefully that'll stand me in good stead for future years.
Well, you say good experience. Loop 4 in particular was a pretty unique experience, given the fact that the last time anybody made it that far, and then with the three winners, what I don't know, finishers. That's the word that I'm looking for this year. Finishing loop 5, they seem to also be working in a bit of a team. I know they didn't quite finish together, but they weren't far apart in the grand scheme of things. So I'm assuming they were in some way both competitive against each other, but also supportive.
I think it's a funny, as an event, it's not really a race so much. Maybe they were racing each other on the final loop, because on that loop you have to go out in opposite directions.
Of course.
So I think that's where Laz does that purposefully, so that people that have hung on suddenly thrown into the kind of into the fray, I guess. But certainly I think until runners are clued into the fact that to finish Barkley, you need to it's more of you're racing against the course itself rather than against each other. So it's not so much a race as a sort of challenge, and the challenge is the course itself, not the other competitors. Yeah.
And then the sort of legend that goes around it about it, with the camp and the buzz at the camp, and the yellow gate that you have to touch. Now, we've seen the video of you approaching the yellow gate at the end of your week 4, and Laz asking you how many pages of the book you've got and things like that. Especially in 2022, is that sort of quite a surreal experience to say, that you've kind of been living and thinking about it and training for this moment, and then you're there, you're on the ground, and it's almost like, I don't know, a kid going to Disney, if that
I
makes
think,
sense.
I mean, I don't know I think once I was there, it was all like, that was what I was doing, I was fully immersed in it, and then it was suddenly very real. So, yeah, I mean, the most surreal thing about it is the fact that you sort of start to, certainly this year, have all the hallucinations and things. That was what made it kind of surreal towards the end. But Barkley itself to me felt very, very real, and like it felt kind of natural, like it felt like I was meant to be there. Yeah, so I didn't find that sort of surreal. It was more the hallucinations and things that came about through lack of sleep that felt odd.
We
That
need to know more about your hallucinations, Jasmin, if you're willing to share. We have heard
yeah,
some
yeah.
crackers over the time we've been doing the podcast, but we want what's Jasmin's Barkley hallucinations involve?
I mean, just generally when I'm hallucinating, I tend to see quite a lot of animals appearing. This year I also, so two other things, like I started to see quite a lot of sculptures in the wood, which was a bit weird. So for example, like a fallen tree with the big, the big roots sticking up. Like it looked like it looked like somebody was sat in a throne with these huge wings looking the opposite way, somebody like silver, kind of, I don't know, a vampire or something. And so as I came past, like they were still like looking at me. It was really, and I expected to be more frightened than I was, because I was climbing past this kind of vampire sitting halfway up the hill. And then there was another point where there was, somebody as a sculpture hanging off a kind of, I don't know, it was like off a bathtub or something. And I remember thinking, this is like, I thought it was kind of a really interesting sculpture, but why on earth put this halfway up a mountain? Like nobody else is going to appreciate it except for me. And that sort of thing. And then also, like, I spent a lot of time hiking with other people that weren't really there, and I had a lot of conversations. And this time it was mainly in those last two climbs that I was doing, and it was a lot of my conversations focused around the fact that it couldn't possibly be so far to the summit of this mountain. So because I was constantly seeing people that weren't there, I started to think that I wasn't actually seeing the right landscape either. So it was a bit odd, because obviously where I was putting my feet matched what I was seeing, but at the same time my brain was telling me it can't possibly be this far, so you must be hallucinating this next bit of climb. But I still carried on going up the climb nonetheless, because I didn't really have a choice. There was nowhere else I could see to go. So it was like this very, very kind of roundabout, odd sort of feeling. But yeah, that's I hallucinated most of my family and best friends, so much so that when I found Damien halfway down the final descent, I assumed he was also just a hallucination. And I had to look at him a few times and look away and look back at him to be sure that he was genuine. Yeah.
Not a demo hologram.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That gets everywhere, that fella.
Is that Mohican for real, Damien?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks for that.
There's a lot worse hallucinations in family you could have had. I mean,
Yeah, no, yeah.
that's lovely. It's
Yeah, yeah.
also quite a powerful thing that,
It was quite comforting. Yeah, it was quite
yeah.
comforting having them there with me. And it
Mhm.
felt like, yeah, it felt like family hiking trips when I was younger. Like having yeah, like complaining and having dad or my brother in front, and my husband was there for a bit as well. So yeah, I definitely felt like I was kind of sharing it with all my favorite people, the final climbs, which was nice.
Awesome. What about support crew? Who was your backup?
Yeah, so you're only allowed one support crew. So and my husband was there, Conrad, which he's absolutely the best possible person that I could have there. Not only does he know me really well, he's really good at crewing. I don't think he's that into Barkley, into the whole thing, but he's like he knows it's important to me. So, and he absolutely put everything into it. He was brilliant. So I'm so grateful that he was there. Like, yeah, I couldn't ask for anybody better. And he was actually really convenient because he had a conference to go to as well in the States. So we know he combined that, so it made us feel a bit better about him traveling out as well. So it was perfect timing, really.
We always like to give a wee space to the people that do the supporting, because it's
Yeah.
very, it's not just in a race environment, but in life in general. You know,
Yeah, no,
it's
I should say as well. So my husband is Conrad Rawlick, and obviously he's like I owe a huge thanks to him as well for all the hours of childcare and all the morning drop-offs and things he did when I went for long runs and then went straight to work and that sort of thing. So, yeah, I think we have a very equal approach to kind of child raising and things with him, but he certainly kind of did the lion, a bigger share when I was on those big days of training for Barkley. So I owe him a huge, huge debt for that.
we've said
Good
it
on you,
before with
Conrad.
we've said it before with a different name. Everybody needs a Conrad. So there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
Can we? Very much aware of timings, right? But I suppose we have to. Well, in my brain, I've got to ask this question. What was it like when you finished? Were you totally spent? How did you? How was your body feeling at the end of that?
Yeah, I was pretty tired at the end of Barkley. I didn't really say it here, but I don't think I've said it really very much. But I didn't have the ideal training going into this Barkley. And like I had some chronic like sort of fatigue issues in the autumn and had to kind of really back off training. And then I had an injury over kind of Christmas time, which took me out of running for like 3 or 4 weeks. So it just, yeah, coming into Barkley wasn't the ideal build up. I'd had sort of 6 weeks of solid, pretty good training, but I didn't, there was that I would have rather had it a bit longer than that. So I think when I actually came to the course, I just absolutely put everything out there. I put my heart into it and threw myself at it like with everything I had and dug really deep. So when I finished, I was pretty tired. I mean, I was still able to walk around and stuff, but I just I was pretty tired. Everything was really dry as well, like my lips and my nose and everything was like really, really dry. And I went for a shower. It was like the best shower, one of the best showers I've ever had for sure. But it took me so long to get dressed afterwards. I was just sitting on the bench and doing things really slowly. And then it was really nice because it was like the afternoon, and I was clean, and I just lay there in a sleeping bag outside in the sunshine, and had the afternoon to kind of just like people came past and talked to me, and I slept a bit, and then it was we had some food, and then it was the evening and the runners came in, so and I got to see all the 3 finishes in. So it was like the perfect post race recuperation, with and lots of good chat with friends.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was pretty special. Really nice to look back on it and remember it was nice.
And there was a good contingent over from
Mm.
Damo and Nikki there as well, and I know that they'll mean a lot to you. And yeah, having that little bit of equilibrium, it sounds like, after the monumental effort that you put into it, it sounds you've painted the perfect picture in my head. And you said you were sitting outside in the sunshine. It got me thinking about the weather, and it sounded, well, it certainly looked like, looking from afar, that the weather this year was kinder than it has
Oh,
been.
it was
Yeah,
phenomenal. It was amazing. Yeah. I think one of the problems with Barclay is that often, the park has quite changeable weather, so that's a pain if you're trying to carry the right kit. And when it changes, it can be quite dramatic. So the year before, for example, on Loop 2, it rained all night, and loads of people got hypothermia and just dropped out because they had nowhere near enough kit.
yeah,
Also, the fog, quite often there's really bad fog there, and so for navigation purposes, that's terrible. But this year I mean, it couldn't have been better. It was really cold. It was really cold. And I did actually run for, I don't know, almost the whole loop at one point, wearing or half a loop wearing my kind of thin down jacket type thing, thermoshell, which is, you know, impressive in a race like that you, when you're going up and down so much, that you'd need to wear that. So it was definitely minus 5, minus 10, I'm guessing, on the tops. But it was clear the whole time, and it was beautiful. So yeah, the weather was incredible, really good.
Thank
Brilliant.
you. No, I'm there. I don't know, I'm not so sure about the running part, but I'm there in that forest.
Yeah,
I'm in the moment.
I'm just trying to remember when was it 2 weeks ago? Less than 2 weeks ago.
It was a week ago. Like, I mean, it was a week and a day ago that we finished, wasn't it, on the Thursday?
And
Yeah.
that's for you to be sitting there so articulate and to describe this is absolutely brilliant.
I tell you, the last morning was incredible. Like my last morning on Loop 4, the sunrise was out of this world. It was just phenomenal. And I've seen a lot of sunrises on the mountains. Like you know, I'm very lucky to have done lots of hiking and things, and sleeping wild in mountains. And it was really beautiful. Very kind of dark purple, pink sky, and it was just really clear. It's hard to describe, which is interesting because that's in contrast to my slightly fuzzy state. But the morning was special. Yeah, it was a really special, clear, kind of cold morning, and very beautiful.
And that's one of these like life affirming things, isn't it? Just to witness that.
A bit like on the spine, when I ran the spine, the section over the Cheviot, it was just an incredible evening with incredible kind of sunset. And that's something that I feel like I'll remember that sky forever, for the rest of my life, the way that the stars came out on that last night on the spine. And it's probably the same for that morning on Barkley, when I was just like, this is unreal. I'm so lucky to be here. Yeah, even though I was suffering, I was just really acutely aware of how lucky I was.
One of these imprinted things in your brain, isn't it? It's these, I don't have anything quite as maybe spectacular as a Barkley sunrise on Loop 4, but it sounds really special. In terms of that, a week on, how's your body?
It's all right, yeah. I had this knee injury going into it, so I've got a chronic knee problem. I've got no anterior cruciate ligament since I was 17, and I've got some cartilage damage and some meniscal damage. So I went into it with like quite worried about my knee, but the funny thing is it got worse till Loop 2, and then seemed to get better. So I don't know. I've not run on it yet, but it seems to be all right, doing okay, so that's good. Interestingly, the ends of my toes are still a bit numb, and I think it's because they get repeatedly like bashed against as you're going downhill. So I think that'll come back. I didn't really have blisters. Like, I think it was just that. I thought it was blisters, but it was just that pain. And yeah, and I've got a bit of I had tendonitis. Like my hand, the top of my hand was really swollen when I finished, and I think it was either to do with the watch or to do with using the poles. So I've still got like a bit of tendonitis in my hand, but other than that, yeah, pretty good.
Other than that, brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
By the day.
Can we move on, because I'm very much aware of time and we want to get as much information as we can from you. But something that you're very passionate about, and you're one of the persons that's the founders, I think, Green Runners. Do you want to say a bit about Green Runners, Jasmin?
Yeah, no, I would love to. So yeah, the Green Runners is, I guess, I was one of the co-founders of the Green Runners, and it's a kind of community of runners that are passionate about improving, I guess, reducing our footprint as runners on the planet, and having a greener approach to the way that we run and live our lives. So the Green Runners movement is based around 4 pillars, and those are thinking about how you kit up, like what we know, how not buying new kit, reusing, recycling, repairing, that sort of thing, how you move. So that would be trying to reduce the amount that you fly to races, traveling less, using public transport, that sort of thing. How you fuel, so eating less meat, eating less dairy, that sort of thing, and then also how you speak out. So that would be whether you're social media minded, or whether you could, there might be as simple as talking to a friend about the green runners, or emailing a race organizer and asking them to change the start time of their race to fit with public transport, for example. It could be anything like that. So those are the kind of 4 pillars. And basically, to become a green runner, anybody that wants to, do their bit for the planet and live a greener life and try to reduce their carbon footprint, anybody can be a green runner. So if you are keen and passionate about that, then you just need to go to the Green Runners and find us on the web, and then you make a pledge. And the important thing is that you take action based on that pledge. And there's a really small membership fee, I think a couple of pounds, £2.50 or something, and that's just to cover the running costs. But the important thing is doing the action. So whether or not you become a member of Green Runners, if we can inspire kind of action and change, then that's a really positive thing. So so I went as Barkley, I was representing the Green Runners. So I don't run for any clothing brand or anything anymore. I was just there representing the Green Runners and hopefully inspiring people along those lines, and also inspiring, women and girls to take part in sport as well. I think that's something that's come back to me quite a few times after these adventures that I've had, that maybe I do that. So that's a great privilege and a great honour to be in that situation as well.
Definitely do.
I think you tick all of the boxes, Jasmin.
100%, as we say around these parts. The green runners. So, there'll be some people listening who are totally aware, because the message is really apparent on social media and things like that. You can see it. You can see people speaking about it. The presence that they've got as an organisation themselves, and the Green Runners Twitter account, Instagrams, posts, and things like that. You see it, but I suppose you're thinking about somebody who, I'd like to be able to. I feel passionate enough to get involved, but it's the small changes that they can make. It doesn't have to be going from here to there. What would be like a couple of small changes that somebody could make in their week to week approach to running that would be sort of almost start the boxes being ticked to the pledges?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I can say a little bit about what I did and what other kind of things you might do. So in terms of travel, now I know that I flew to Barkley, so that is, definitely something that some people have raised, which I think is very reasonable. I decided not to fly to any other races, so I didn't enter Hard Rock for that reason. And I travelled by train to the UTMB last year, and I'll do the same for the Tour de Géant. So it's a case of kind of picking and choosing. If you are going to fly, maybe just prioritize one race and not do others. So that's, kind of that sort of advice. If you can travel by public transport or by land and sea, then do that. As I say, I travelled to the UTMB by train. So that's kind of a bit about travel. For races in the UK, maybe car share, or as I say, if you can get the train and get the race organizer to put a minibus on from the train station, then that'll be fantastic. Then in terms of how you fuel, for example, well, in my family, I just switched to drinking oat milk in tea, and actually that's reduced our dairy consumption pretty much by half, just because I drink that much tea with milk in it. So and now I like it more anyway. So that's in terms of our dairy consumption, made a real difference, and we sort of naturally trying to switch to other things than eating so much cheese, hummus and that sort of thing. So I've done that, and so I think we've made a difference there. And if you're, depending on what people's diet is already, it might be a case of saying, well, you're only going to eat meat once a week, for example. That would be an example for other people. And then in terms of kit, well, we have on the Green Runners pages like directions as advice about repairing trainers. So if you see our uppers, for example, and it's holes, then you can just repair them rather than assuming that they need to be thrown away the minute they have a hole in. So that would be piece of advice. And then just keeping them clean, washing them with cold water after you've run naturally helps to make them last longer, for example. And then kit swap at races, kit swap within your club, so that if a piece of kit doesn't fit you or doesn't work for you, then maybe you could swap it with someone that it does, rather than buying a new one. So those are kind of all ideas. And speaking out, I think we've chatted a little bit about already.
Yeah, awesome. I think like anything with change, some people are like, okay, I don't want to go. I want to start my journey towards that, and there is small changes that we can make that all all rolled up together can contribute quite a hefty lot. So,
Yeah.
you know, if everybody just done one thing, then, you know, and then it becomes more habitual. You're saying about
Yeah,
oat
exactly.
milk,
Yeah,
and you start actually, I enjoy oat milk more than I do
yeah,
dairy. And
exactly. Yeah.
and so you often find you discover things during this process as well. So no, it's a fantastic initiative, and yeah, one that you spoke there about. I can't remember what it was. I was like, oh no, it was washing trainers when you get back from a run with cold water, as opposed to piling them up at your front door in a neat-ish bundle. That you expect maybe the trainer fairy to take away and wash for you. This is maybe something that I'm guilty of. So I pledge, hope my wife's not listening to this, Jasmin, I pledge to stop that bad habit.
It's being recorded, Stephen.
It's been recorded. Anyway, there you go. I've made a pledge that's something that I need to get better at myself, because it does prolong the life of the trainers, and
Yeah.
the threads don't break as quickly, and because of that, the trainers hold together for longer.
Yeah.
I'm aware
But
of it all.
I'd absolutely agree with you that making little changes, you find that it's like a cumulative process. Like
Yeah.
it feeds forward into doing more. Like I've definitely found that I started making changes, and then it's a positive feedback, and it naturally fuels making more changes.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would just point out is, like, I'm totally aware that I'm like very much not perfect. Like none of us is perfect in this. If just by being alive we're generating, we have a carbon footprint. But the best thing is we can do is just start trying,
Mhm.
even if it's little things, and encourage others to try, and together we'll make a big difference. And importantly, the kind of speaking out is really important, because we can't just do this by individual action. We need, like, the big decision makers, to make a difference in terms of fossil fuels and that sort of thing. So that's
Yeah.
where the speaking out becomes really important.
And I think climate change is on everybody's radar now. Everybody's speaking about it. It's one of the hot topics. So speaking out, speaking up, it's not a big challenge. The conversation's there, so just take part.
Yeah.
I love that. It sounds to me a really simple thing. Race directors, take note, have a kit swap. It's a simple thing,
Yeah.
And
I feel like that if you're gonna have a van that's selling new kit, then have also a van that's doing a kit swap, or just swatch
Yeah.
them out. I get that you need spot, but I think there's definitely a niche market there for people to do kit swaps at races. I totally agree.
Brilliant.
Thank
Okay,
you.
let's.
Well, we're actually going to talk about Jasmin's favourite piece of kit, which is a nice. We love a segue round here. A nice segue from one of the main pillars of the Green Runners. But we all have something in our run drawer or whatever, your running box under the bed, which is what I have. That's your go-to. Do you know whether it's something to wear, accessory, shoes, whatever? What's your most sort of trusted bit of kit?
I mean, honestly, I have to say, I'm like sort of the least kit bothered person. I think that the only thing that I really need for going running in the hills is like a decent pair of shoes. And so for me, like, I guess mud claws would be the Innovate mud claws, and I ran for Innovate for lots of years. But I liked their shoes before that, and I still wear their shoes. At the moment, I'm wearing whether that changes, but in terms of, that's the shoe that I ran in Barkley, and if you got, like, if it's really muddy and you need like really good grip, then that's the shoe at the moment that I'm wearing. So I think I'd probably still say in those mud claws, and certainly shoes would be my number one thing. Other than that, I think you don't really need much to be a runner, and that's what I think is one of the delights of it. You can just go out the front door, pair of shorts and a t-shirt and a pair of shoes is what you really need in summer, isn't it? To go and enjoy the hills.
Absolutely, here. And I think just having that confidence in your feet is the one proviso that you need to be descending with a bit of confidence. And if you've got studs that are worn out and you're putting yourself in danger, then that's not so good. mud claws. John, you've got mud claws. No, he hasn't really, Jasmin.
I know. No, I haven't. Away from things like the spine and the rounds and the Monroes and the mountains and the Barkley, how does Jasmin Paris relax?
I mean, you know, I guess, I mean, I like wild swimming. I like swimming just generally. I've always swum. I like doing art as well if I ever get the time. But realistically now, if I have any free time, I want to spend it with my children. So my ideal situation would be like a Sunday afternoon where you can go for a walk somewhere, somewhere, quite wild. Ideally, we've got a cottage, you'd get a cottage somewhere. If you've got a cottage somewhere and you're away for a few days and you know that there's nothing else to do except for spend time outside with your children, and that's my ideal dream situation. Just enjoying them and being outdoors in a wild place, in nature. So so if I had to choose, it would always be with my children and my and Conrad. So and the dog, of course. We've got a dog called Moss,
Oh,
and
yes.
he's always happy to be outside as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay. Question just popped into my head. Lads is also famous for the backyard ultra. Is that something that do you fancy that?
I mean, I've thought about it a little bit. It's definitely, I guess that sort of event is really just tapping into that thing of, can you do it and how long can you put yourself through it? You're starting to lose all the other things that I do, the reasons that I do running, the kind of the journey and the kind of beautiful surroundings. I mean, I'm not sure, I don't get the impression that they're particularly amazing surroundings, the places that he does the loops on. I'm not going to say that I'm never going to do it because I know what I've been like so far. So I'm not been massively attracted to it. But I guess there might be a point at which I sort of ask myself, how long could you keep going for, type thing. And it's the same for any of these kind of, you look at these 24-hour, 48-hour races where people just run around a track. Like I really can't see myself ever wanting to do that. But there is an element of that sort of how, that challenge of, they're those sorts of events are the things that really just ask you to dig deep and keep going, and I think that's kind of what I am quite good at that. So who knows what I'll end up doing at some point.
You're not bad.
You're not bad.
You're not bad. You're that's very, very good. Right. Let's wrap this up because they're very much aware of timings. Stephen.
Okay, yes. I know this is something that you've given a lot of thought to, Jasmin. We have a dialect dictionary where we ask guests to throw something in, maybe a phrase or a word that you've picked up from where you live down in the Peak District, or you've picked up on your travels, something unique. Over to you for a submission.
So I actually, I had completely forgotten that I was going to need to do this. I think I should say something Czech. So I'm actually half Czech, and I was brought up bilingual. I've got a family there, and my kids speak Czech as well. So I feel like it should be Czech from me. Exactly what I say is it's difficult to say. It probably should be something like um, um, it probably should be something running related, shouldn't it? So, I don't know, something like dotoha, which means like something along the lines of keep it up, keep going, let's go. You might shout that to someone to kind of spur them on a bit like the way in the Alps they shout various ale type thing, a bit like that.
Yeah. Amino.
Amino. The Spanish equivalent ale. Yeah. Going to spell it, Jasmin, just so that I can put it in the right place in the dictionary.
I feel like
Well,
I definitely should have given this more thought. 'Cause
That's
like
okay.
tomorrow, I'm going to be like, I know I should have said something totally different.
Fine.
Okay, well, nobody's ever gonna. How many checklists probably do you have? So
323 we have actually. No, I'm only joking.
We checked analytics. There's a lot of followers in the chat in public.
DO and then as a separate word, TOHO.
Okay,
The Toho.
it's in our
Keep it
first check entry into the dialect dictionary. Thank you very much for that. And on to the final
Yes, I shall say
big
the
important
Toho.
question.
Yeah, I shall
It's
use
John.
that tonight at the dinner table. Okay, yeah, our last question for you, Jasmin, is we have a playlist, Young Hearts Run Free LaBeouf Buff Volume 4 playlist. Which song would you like to add in for our listeners' pleasure?
I have a feeling that you might already have this suggestion. Kate Bush, Running Up That Hill. Do you already have that in there?
Listen, I'm not sure, but if it is, I think there was a Stronger Things going on with that, wasn't there? But
I think
you know
we
what?
had the placebo version of it, which do you know?
Yeah.
So placebo did a cover version of it, and
Yeah.
and we had somebody from the Lakeland 100 on the other week. No, but that was on our spin-off of Access All Areas podcast, John. So no, it's
No.
fine.
Yeah,
It's
and you know what?
totally
Even
fine.
if it was, if Jasmine Paris wants to add it in again, it's going in again. So thank you very much for that,
Well, I'll be
Jasmine.
putting it on repeat.
It's a brilliant tune. It's a brilliant tune the first time round, and the
Mm.
second time round has been even better. So thank you
Yeah,
very
yeah.
much,
Thank you,
Jasmine. Very much aware of timing. Sorry, I really open invitation to come back again and speak to us about the other things that you've done and yet to do. But I really thank you for your time today. It's been an honour to speak to you. So thank you very much. I'll hand over to Stephen to wrap
Thanks
up.
so much, Jasmine, for making room to speak to us in your hectic schedule, which is you know what it's like having young children. So not alone with all the other stuff that you've got on. So thanks so much, and a massive well done on Barkley and your achievements over there. I can't wait. It sounds like to me that there's a appetite to go back and complete the job, so to speak, if that's fair to say, Jasmine. So I can't wait to see how that transpires. But no, it's been an absolute privilege to get to speak to you, and I'll maybe need to just make sure my wife doesn't hear a segment about my running trainers. I'm worried about that. You can tell that's my worried face. So no, thanks so much, Jasmine. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks. It's been a pleasure to be on. Thanks very much.
Awesome.